So I'm gonna translate a little bit of this book for you guys, real quick. The book is called Compendio de la Historia General de México, desde los tiempos prehistóricos hasta la época actual. It's almost like a compendium of the general history of Mexico, from the prehistoric times to the actual epic, written by Nicolas Leon, professor of anthropology, physical anthropology, in the National Museum of Mexico. And we know who Nicolas is. He found that city near El Paredon in Coahuila that was buried, with elephants and humans and everything, old age. So we're going to read what he has to say about the ancient people of Mexico. I'm going to go to page 14 of this book. All right, they're talking about some of this early people and some of the possible migrations. They give a lot of theories. They throw in the Bering one. They say maybe Australia, or they say maybe from the Atlantic. All kinds of different theories. But we're going to translate all this right here, all this paragraph. We're going to bring that over here. We're going to translate that, but we're going to go get the rest of it. So we grab the next paragraph, bring it over to the translation as well, and we translate all of it. So again, I'm translating this whole part right here, all the way down to this period where it says Mexicana. So here's the translation. I'm assuming. So it says, as the immigrations to the soil of Mexico, according to the traditions that have come down to us, came mainly from the north, they were. He has pointed out how the path followed by them from Asia, Bering Strait, and the Aleutian Islands to the Alaska Peninsula. They also indicate, in order to explain the emigrations from the south, Polynesia, since the traditions tell us that immigrants arrived from the south in boats. The third question resolves itself as a necessary consequence of what has been said above by assigning Asiatic origin to the primitive races inhabiting our soil. So based on the theories, the Bering Strait, or that they came from Southeast Asia, because they're always saying somebody came over here. They're always seeing it in reverse. They're never saying that we came out of here, right? But look what he's going to say after this. So that's why they're assigning an Asiatic origin, because those are the theories or stories, right? Now, by dealing in particular with the immigration of each of them, we will mark their exodus. And look what he says here now. The oldest inhabitant of Mexico, according to some, is the black man, and according to others, the Otomi. All right? I'm going to go back to the book. Just want to show you guys that's there. It says here, el más antiguo habitante de México, según unos, es el hombre negro, the oldest inhabitant of Mexico. All right? It's here. Existencia de hombres negros, or the existence of black men. The existence of black men and giants is a common belief in almost all the races of our soil. It's part of their traditions, and in their various languages they have words to designate them. Archaeological objects found in various localities prove their existence. Remember, it's in the pottery, it's in the stone, it's in the walls. They're depicting so-called black folks. The most notable being the granite salt at Hueyapan, Veracruz, and an axe of the same kind from a nearby locality. In Teotihuacan, there is an abundance of Ethiopic type heads painted black. And we've shown a lot of those mask, pottery, terracottas, these stone objects. Check out the previous videos. We just had one the other day. The terracottas. Go check that out. Ethiopic, huh? So-called black. Look. And in Michoacan and Oaxaca, we have also found them. All right? In all those places too. They're almost total extinction, huh? At the time of the conquest. Oh, so when the Spanish came, when the Europeans came, these ancient people went extinct? Really? Is that what really happened? Or were they enslaved and taken to other parts of America, Europe, and West Africa, and then called Negroes? Misclassified, paper genocide. Oh, really? You're still here, dodge the hijack. They're always trying to say you went extinct. So during the time of conquest, huh? And the memory of them recorded in the most ancient traditions leads us to believe that they were the primitive inhabitants of the Mexican land, okay? all the traditions, the most ancient traditions that's recorded. They were the primitive inhabitants of the Mexican land, okay? Su extinción casi total en los tiempos de la conquista y el recuerdo de ellos consignado en las tradiciones más antiguas, the oldest traditions, induce a creer, leads us to believe that they were, que ellos fueron los primitivos habitantes de la tierra mexicana, the oldest inhabitants of the Mexican land. And in the next page, just want to show you guys, this is the colossal head, of course, they're saying, cabeza colosal de Hueyapan, all right, Veracruz, as you guys can see. All right, so we're going to move on to the next book we're going to translate. It's in Spanish as well, and it's called México, or Mexico, a través de los siglos, Mexico throughout the centuries. And I just want to show you this image that it has almost in the beginning of the book, right? That says, again, Mexico a través de los siglos. And I just want to show you how they drew the Indians, right? Over here on the left. Do you guys see that? Let me zoom in. All right, this is how they drew the Indians. Do you guys see? Do you guys see that, right? Copper-colored tribes of America, so-called black. Look at that. That's how they drew the Indians and the cover of the book, okay? We're going to go ahead and get into this book, see what it's going to tell us. All right, so on page 62 of this book, I'm going to start in this paragraph right here. As you guys can see, I'm going to grab all this and bring it over. So we're going to read what it's saying. It's pretty interesting what it's going to say before it tells us about the oldest inhabitants there again. It's going to tell us about a bone they found, just like the stuff we've been talking about where they find bones and they have drawings on them or something like that, telling you that there was actually human beings, intelligent beings doing that art back in time, okay? So it says here, in our territory there existed in very ancient times a fauna that undoubtedly perished in the great cataclysms that this part of the world suffered. Nothing is more common than finding fossils of mastodon, elephant, all right, elephants, here you go, ox, zebras, all right, zebra horses, and even donkeys, without a doubt. These findings led to the invention of fables about giants in ancient times and perpetuated them in colonial times. While in the work of Technixiac Tajo, in the fossiliferous layers, a bone was found, all right? We're talking about deep in the ground, fossiliferous layers. A bone was found when February 4th, 1870, which draws notable attention due to the notches or cuts it has and which are unquestionably the work of man's hand, okay? So no doubt a human did this, okay? This bone is apparently a llama, sacrum, and taking advantage of part of its same shape, the figure of the head of a coyote pig has been completed, making the cuts undoubtedly with a sharp instrument. They drew a coyote pig, they're saying. They drew something on it with a sharp instrument. They have the evidence, they know. Since the gloss on the lip of the wound, noting that it was made by successive and short blows, the spongy tissue and meshes of the bone are impregnated with ball and tough. The medullary canal is also full of adherent tough, and visible remains of it remain in the cavities that contain the eyes and noses. Since there can be no doubt that the sculptural part of the bone is the work of man's hand, it logically follows that it already existed in our valley at a time to which the site in which it was found corresponds. Okay, these are geologists again, letting you know where they found this, and it's deep, deep, this is old. Assuming that said site appeared intact, without that had suffered any geological disorder, and the fossil in question was 12 meters deep, 12 meters deep. Let's now look at the circumstances of that site. The terrain is Neozoic or Postiary. The fossils found there are elephant, glyptodon, ox, horse, and pigs. The bone in question could resemble the head of this last animal. The layers of the reservoir consist of topsoil, mud, pumice tuff, limestone tuff, clay tuff, humus sand, quartz sand, and feldspathic sand, conglomerates, compact limestones, ferruginous clays, and marls. The bone was found there, near the carpaccio of a glitodon. We're going to go back, next page, and we're going to grab all this. All right, now we go back. Okay, so I got the translation right here. And it says, this in turn proves that man existed here in later times, and that he was a contemporary of the colossal fauna. We're talking about prehistoric times. Man was there in the Valley of Mexico. Remember, we already showed that in a previous video we did yesterday, which was later lost. And we must suppose that even then it reached a relative antiquity, for it takes the lapse of many years for man, and especially primitive man, clumsy and rude in itself, to come to possess a sumptuary art, such as sculpture, however imperfect it may be considered, and to use sharp instruments for this purpose. And perhaps he has already formed a religion, for this bone may well be an animal idol. In any case, the proof exists. Man in our territory is as old as in the old world. Okay, guys? That's a body bag for the illusion, all right? In Spanish, de todas maneras, la prueba existe, the proof exists, that man, el hombre en nuestro territorio, in our territory, is just as old, es tan antiguo como en el viejo mundo, just like in the old world, okay? Now look at what it's going to say. But who is this native man? So who made this art and this bone? We're talking about very ancient times. Who is this antediluvian, huh? We're talking about before cataclysms? But who is this native man, an inhabitant of the Valley of Mexico since ancient times? We did not hesitate to answer that it was the Otomi. However, it gives us reason to doubt the existence of the black man in our territory. Did the Otomi come before he existed, or was he the first invader? They're always going to say you came from somewhere else. On the continent, which joins ours on the west, the man was black. And after the separation, this black man remained in New Zealand, as well as in Australia and Southern Africa. So listen to what he's saying. He's saying, hey, when the lands were together, they were, here, and then they split, and some stayed in Australia, some in Africa, some in New Zealand, and the rest, some in here in America. We have our own. That's with the Pangea theory and all that. That doesn't still mean they came out of Africa and traveled over here or walked over here. That doesn't mean that. In Asia, there was also the black man. When India was invaded by later peoples, the remnants of the black race took refuge in the mountains in the central region called Vinya. There are still those black men, the Glondos, the Colas, the Bilas, the Meras of Mount Aravali, the Chitase, the Minas, and the Paharias, whose traditional expiration has engendered the name of Parias, all right? The Hindustani, ancient Hindu people. And we've shown a lot of images from the 1800s, images of people in Southeast Asia that they never showed us. So check out those videos. But look how they correlate in what we've already learned on this book, in this Spanish book about Mexico. As for our continent, there are hardly any traces of the black man, which proves that his existence on it was in a very distant period. Dodge the hijack, but at least they're admitting they were there in ancient times, and they're still there. So dodge the hijack. What he's saying was the black race the first in the world and spread throughout it by virtue of the union of the continents, or when it came to ours, did the Otomi already exist here? We don't know. Its disappearance presents to us as an expelled race, and consequently a previous one. All right, disappearance, again, extinction, disappearance. They enslaved a lot of you. The rest were always there. They just reclassified you into so-called Negroes or Afro-Mexicanos. Yeah, they call you Afro-Mexicano. They might have a deeper history there in Mexico than you think. But the autochthonous character of the Ottoman race are indications against it, and a traditional fact that in our opinion matters a great deal. Until recent times, priests painted themselves black as if it were a memory of the introducers of the first code, their deities, huh? As a clear trace of the black race, we have some little heads of Teotihuacan, and we have seen a serpentine mass of the very clear type. With regard to these little heads, we will say that in the innumerable mounds of the ruins of the great city, they are found among various objects. They are of clay, an end in a neck or appendage. According to Mr. Orozco, they were placed in the burial mounds to commemorate one's race, and indeed, on careful examination of them, it is observed that they are not formed ad libitum, and comparing them, it is seen that the artificers copied from. Gonna grab this paragraph real quick, guys, and we bring it over. We're gonna go ahead and translate this as well. So they copied specific people. They're talking about the heads, the mask, the pottery, the terracotta. We're looking at specific people. They didn't just imagine it. They were looking at people that had so-called Negro features, yeah, as their models. Among them are some with hollow and flat noses and protruding lips, which could only be applied to black individuals, so-called black. It is also apparent from the examination of these little heads that some belong to known types, while others refer to figures and headdresses quite strange and different from those recorded in historical times. This proves that previously there were peoples with unknown costumes and races different from those of the Jewish times. I think it would suffice to venture the assertion of the ancient existence of the Negro race, the discovery made of little heads of their kind. But to add insult to injury, we have as another proof the colossal head. All right, and this is the image that they have again, a colossal head. Hey, we don't just have little miniatures, and we have these giant so-called Negroid heads all over this area in the jungles and everything, temples and everything. So we're gonna keep translating the rest of it. So the colossal heads from Hueyapan. It was discovered in the 1860s on the hacienda of that name, located near San Andres Tuxtla, that is, in one of the hottest places near our Gulf Coast. It was found by chance while working in the field, and curiosity was limited to digging the earth to discover it, leaving in it the hole that had formed. The head is made of granite, 2 yards high and with the corresponding proportions. His type is clearly Ethiopian, or so-called black or Negro type, and his special headdress and the cuneiform incision of his forehead are striking, reminiscent of some sacred sign from Asia. Yeah, dodge the hijack, always seeing it in reverse. Since a single piece of information, no matter how precise it may be, is always suspicious, we must congratulate ourselves on the second discovery, which is a very large granite axe, also found on the coast of Veracruz. Seeing its size and weight, it is difficult to understand how they could use it. The upper part of the axe is a man's head, similar to that of Hueyapan. The headdress is similar. On the back, it has the cuneiform incision, but the black guy is more marked, but the black type, el tipo negro, it says right here, is marked more. I'm gonna grab this part right here. So it's marked more clearly, the flatness of the nose and the more pronounced protruding lips. But the peremptory proof of the ancient existence of the black race on our continent is that its remains are still found there. And the primitive chroniclers tell us about others. Such are the Caracules of Haiti, the Californiums of the Caribbean islands, the Californiums, the Argaos of Cutara, the Auroras of Orjaruras of the Orinoco. They're saying these are all so-called black nations, okay? Different parts of the Americas. All right, we're gonna grab these ones. Continuing, he's gonna name some more. The Chaimas of Guyana, the Maniyupas or Yorgigis and Malayas of Brazil, the Negritas, Chuanas or Gaunas of the Darien Isthmus, the Manalis of Popoyan, the Guatas, Huetar, and Jaras or Sanijos of Honduras, the Esteros of New California, the Black Indians found by the Spanish in Louisiana, and the moon and albino eyes, some discovered in Panama and others destroyed by the Iroquois. All right, so this is all right here, guys. The ones they found in Louisiana, right? So I'm going to grab this paragraph now. Continues, says, all this shows that in a very distant time, or before the existence of the Otomi, or rather invading them, The black race occupied our territory, all right, in very distant times when the continents were still united? Huh? He's saying way back. Now, this is a little bit of their conjecture. They don't know that, but he's just letting you know we're talking about a really distant past, guys. This race brought religious ideas and its own cult. Later, they were evicted and driven out to the coast by the Ottoman. Or perhaps they were forced to look for those hot places appropriate for their special nature, forced by the cooling that this continent suffered with its separation and with the cataclysms of which it was the theater. Let us now examine the special characteristics of the Ottoman race to convince ourselves that it is the primitive and oldest. In fact, even if the black race is the first to spread on Earth, even if we admit it is the primitive inhabitant of our continent, it is, however, it is a bird of passage, and we must look for another breed to call native. Oh man, you guys see that? Oh, so what if they the first? Well, they're not here anymore. Oh man. So dodge the hijack big time, guys. You guys are still there, and it's just his this part is his opinion. Speaking about the Otomi, Motolinia presents them as a barbaric and low metal generation. All right. So now he goes to talk about the other people. All right, so I just wanted to go ahead and translate all that part for you guys. And so, he admitted it. You see, guys, another book. I'm going to go back to the cover. Again, this is the book Mexico a través de los siglos. This is written by Vicente Riva Palacio. Now, remember the book we just read before, written by Nicolas Leon. It's saying the exact same thing. Two different people, two different scholars, anthropologists, archaeologists. Very prominent ones in Mexico, saying the same thing. I now draw your attention to this third book. It's called Estudios, Arqueológicos y Etnográficos. Etnográficos, right? So, Archaeological Studies and Ethnographics. Americanos, Volume 1. Prehistory and Travels in America. This is by Carlos Cuervo Marquez, member of the Academy or National Academy of History in Colombia. This is from 1920. Again, another scholarly book. If I go to page 270, this is chapter 16, and it says here, Los Negroides en America. That's literally what it says. We're not making this up. As you guys see, the Negroids in America. We're going to copy all this and bring it over to get translated, right? So it says here, in the corresponding description, we have already noted that in the statues of figures 13 and 14, of very ancient appearance and represented with singular attributes, the characteristic features of the Negroid type are faithfully reproduced. A significant fact that is not unique in America and that is repeated in the oldest Mexican sculptures. It's not unique to this area, it's all over, such as in the great dioritic head of Guayapan and in the gigantic axe of Veracruz, with which, above all, one of the aforementioned statues presents great analogies. Do these two concordant facts mean that in ancient times America was occupied by black people? All right? Again, they're asking you. They're so confused because they think everybody came out of Africa. We're going to grab the rest and bring it over. Continues, says, this hypothesis is corroborated by the fact that the conquistadors found scattered throughout the New World small tribes that were from the first considered to be black. In this connection, it will not be superfluous to recall that Vasco Núñez de Balboa, in his expedition for the discovery of the South Sea, found to his great surprise, according to Gomara, that the Curecas of Panama owned black slaves, whom they obtained, as they said, from distant lands. Yeah, distant lands. If you go to South America, Brazil, and you're talking about Panama or Peru, you're talking about Florida or North Carolina, and you bring them over the way to Panama, that's distant lands. Moreover, blacks often figure in the remotest traditions of some American peoples. Some tribes in Darien say that when their ancestors first came to that region, it was occupied by small black men who later retired to the forest. And the Payas and Tapalizas of the Cuna Cuna trace their origin back to a man and two women, one Indian and the other black, who lived on the banks of the Tartacuna, right? So that's the hijack. So the stories, how they mix up people, you know, what do you mean an Indian and a black? Indians are black, a lot of them. A lot of them are light skinned, but a lot of them were so called black. To this race, no doubt, must be referred the ancient skeletons of a very different structure from those of the American red race. All right, we bring the next translation over. Continuing, several points of the continent have been found from Bolivia to Mexico. Worthy of attention in this regard are the two skulls with exaggerated prognatism, a lowered forehead, developed processes, and strong superciliary arches found in the mountains of Sumapaz by the enlightened professor Mr. Dr. Juan de Dios Carrasquilla, which in a whole they remind us of the skull of the old man of Cro-Magnon. Now remember what we said about Cro-Magnon. Cro-Magnon most likely came out of America. They're calling him Cro-Magnon. He went over there to Europe and met Neanderthals, huh? It is possible then, we repeat that in ancient times, the young America was also a black continent, and that the Otomi of Mexico, the Caracoles of Haiti, the Arguajos of Cutara, the Arabos of the Orinoco, and the Porcigis and the Matayas of Brazil, the Manabis of Quito, the Chuanas of Darien, and the albinos of Panama are the remains of the indigenous Negroid race. Okay, even the albinos. But they're letting you know they were also remnants of the indigenous Negroid race on which the so-called red or American race was later formed, so-called. In this case, the two statues we have been talking about, as well as their similar Mexican ones, would be nothing more than reminiscence of the primitive natives preserved by the invaders who immediately took over the continent. Perhaps one day, as the dense shadows that hide the remote paths of American prehistory dissipate, bright and unknown horizons will be discovered for science, veiled today by darkness, as deep as it is mysterious. All right, so that's kind of deep. Another book, all right, a third book, guys. That's three books I read to you, three different authors telling you the same thing of ancient Mexico, but also of ancient America, melanated people all over the place. Again, Compendio de la Historia General de México by Nicolas Leon, México a través de los siglos by Vicente Riva Palacio, Estudios Arqueológicos y Etnográficos, Americanos by Carlos Cuervo, Marquez. This is facts over feelings. It's research, archaeology, anthropology over beliefs. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for tuning in once again. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.